Today we'll be looking at some of the most badly designed cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! But before we get into this, I suppose it should be really important that I kind of lay out the foundations for what exactly bad design means. Now, in my opinion, bad design is referring to cards that are counterproductive to kind of like your win condition or established sort of objectives of the duel. They're counterintuitive to your strategy. They defy sort of established logic of the game. They defy game mechanics, or they're just basically pointless. It's hard to really define this and pinpoint an exact definition, but basically bad design doesn't have to mean overpowered or terrible, really. So there are some really good Yu-Gi-Oh cards I'm sure you're thinking of already, but that doesn't mean that they're badly designed. It could just be that they're really, really strong. Like for example, Soul Charge, I would say that's not really badly designed, it's just really, really powerful. So this list is in no particular or specific order, and with that very vague and ambiguous definition out of the way, let's begin. SPYGAL MISTY. And if you're really observant, you should be able to understand why this card is on the list. Because it's not due to it being overpowered or broken or something like that, or having some stupid effect. This card is not a spiral monster. Why is this card not a spiral monster? I don't know. A lot of people were really hyped about Spirals getting some more support and stuff, and then this came out and everyone was like, this isn't even fucking searchable. I can't use this in my deck. I just have to randomly draw Misty, like, if I want to play my deck. Like, it's so stupid. There's no reason why this card wasn't made part of the Spiral archetype. You know, if it's anything to do with it being too strong, I mean, Spiral Sleeper plus Last Resort combo. Apparently, is that not overpowered? Oh, I guess not. You know, Misty bouncing a card was like too crazy. It's just really stupid. I can't think of an actual real reason why this card wasn't made part of the archetype and instead they just went with SPYGAL, unless they were just really obsessed with the pun, or they sort of made a mistake and then just kind of ran with it for like the rest of the set's print. It's just so stupid. So, Fiber Jar. This card is quite old, and some of you might not be familiar with it, but basically, when it's flipped up, you shuffle all cards in both players' hands and graveyard and field into the deck, and then both players draw 5 cards. So, it's basically just a reset button for the duel. It is literally just a reset button, and unless, of course, obviously you're playing a banish deck, then it doesn't affect the banish zone, obviously it doesn't affect the life points. But this card is pretty much just a reset button. And I just find this to be very just badly designed, because I don't think that that should be part of a card's effect. Like, what is it you're trying to gain by resetting the duel? You know, you should be trying to build your deck to like win and, you know, achieve a sort of win condition based around what your archetype and strategy is that you've chosen. But Fiber Jar just says, no, let's just start again. Let's just do over. Let's take time out. And let's play again, okay? I find it very bizarre. The entire Yang Zing archetype. I think that anything made after, I don't know, 2012 or something, like Konami decided that FFX were probably just the default standard. And missing the timing has to just become a thing of the past, because I think missing the timing is just really stupid, and I don't know why it was ever a thing, because it was just this extra layer of convoluted game rules and mechanics that didn't need to be there for any reason. It really didn't need to be there. Like, it doesn't, missing the timing just doesn't have to exist. And yet in 2014, which is a very new deck by, you know, sort of just the kind of overarching perspective of the game, like in the grand scheme of things, 2014 is very recent, and they made this deck able to be mistimed. Every single monster can miss timing. The entire archetype can miss timing. That's so stupid. That's so stupid. I just find it really, really dumb. And now we've got PARASITE. So this card, I think, kind of wasn't really taken into consideration for when it comes to card sleeve colors. See, the thing is, the really weird sort of rule in Yu-Gi-Oh is that you get the final cut, not your opponent. You know, if they search their deck, whatever, you're the one who gets the final cut. So if they have yellow sleeves and your cards have, I don't know, red sleeves, all you need to do is shuffle your card to the top of their deck, and that's completely legal. Like, you know, some people might be in that situation and be like, no, you have to look away when you shuffle or something. That's not true. you can look at your opponent's deck as you shuffle it. Like, look at the top of the deck, obviously, not the actual card text and stuff. So you can see the card, like, sleeves being shuffled. So another card to add to the list is Sixth Sense. Now, I believe that Sixth Sense is badly designed, not because of the fact that it's completely overpowered, which some of you might be thinking, but the reason that I think is that it's badly designed is that if you read the card and you kind of take away all of the sort of known card pool from Yu-Gi-Oh! Out of your brain, and you can kind of just read it objectively and in a vacuum, you might think to yourself, oh wow, this card, I can like get 5 or 6 cards if I, roll a dice and say 5 or 6, but I risk losing 5 or 6 cards out of my deck. Damn, that's a big risk, but a big reward. Now, that's what you kind of think of the card in theory, but in practice, if you have something like, which is when this card was banned around the time of Dragon Rulers, whether you get those 5 or 6 cards to your hand or to the graveyard is irrelevant. So the reason I believe this card is particularly badly designed is because it creates this illusion, and it tries to pretend that it's fair, that it has this sort of balanced kind of, risk-reward factor to it, when it doesn't. It's completely just all in, it's so good. It doesn't matter if you're milling, because, graveyard cards are a thing. Now, obviously, maybe when this card was printed, I'm not sure how long ago it was printed, but graveyard effects have been pretty relevant in Yu-Gi-Oh! So, it probably should have been taken into consideration when it's being designed, because there have always been fairly decent, graveyard-reliant decks. Upstart Goblin. Now, this is a bit of a strange one, but hear me out on this. I believe that Upstart is actually a badly designed card, and, it's been limited to 1 recently. I'd like to know what Konami's reasoning was for it, but at least the way I see it, I think that Upstart is a badly designed card because it actually kind of just skips the basic fundamental and mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh! You have to have a minimum of 40 cards in your deck. You can't legally enter a tournament unless you have 40 cards. Playing 3 copies of Upstart essentially said that you can bypass this and play less cards in your deck. Now, if you were to try and build and design your own deck, if you were to completely ignore the restrictions of the card number, you might maybe think to yourself, and generally what it comes out to is that most decks have an optimal number of cards to be around about 30 to 35 cards. Everything after that is kind of filler. Like, you don't really want to play things like Rhoda in a warrior deck. You don't really want to play like, back row removal and stuff. In terms of like your pure engine, you probably only really want about 30 to 35 cards in your deck. So Upstart really kind of just bypasses that minimum threshold required by, tournament settings and just says, that's fine, you can play less cards. So I think it's really badly designed for that reason. Now, obviously, some people would say like, oh, well, it's got like the life point restriction. Life points have never, really been that relevant unless it's a super, super slow format. Generally, seeing the next powerful card in your deck is, outweighs the 1,000 life point deficit. In this, we have Delinquent Duo. I don't think there's particularly much to say on this, but I think that the fact that a card that just... Generally, cards that touch and interfere and interact with your opponent's hand are going to be fairly sort of on a slippery slope regardless in terms of how powerful they are. Because there's always going to be like some loop or something you can do. But Delinquent Duo just is... It's really crazy because, it's not like... Heavy Storm Duster, for example, which is a +1 technically, but it requires a bit of setup. It requires your opponent to commit cards to the field. Delinquent Duo is just something that just rips cards out of your opponent's hand, and the hand is a very sort of, I guess you could call it like a sacred place in Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like, this is where your cards are generally going to be safe. You don't have to worry about MST and things like that if you want to commit to the board. So the fact that this card just simply takes a card out of your opponent's hand and then takes another one, that's just why I think this is really stupid. This is the +1 out of the hand. I just think it's absolutely absurd. Now, obviously, it's really broken, but I think it's badly designed on top of being broken because of the fact that it is just a +1 that is taking away resources from your opponents, just in a really unfair way. And next we have Infernity. Now, I think that hand advantage, perhaps maybe not hand advantage, but card advantage, resource management, these kind of things are really fundamental to Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's like how you improve as a player is learning how to master these aspects and how to get better at managing these kind of different things and tools at your disposal within a duel. But Infernity kind of just takes conventional dueling and throws it out the window and says, I don't want to play with a hand. Now, On the surface, I think that that's a particularly kind of unique and sort of cool way to duel. You know, it's like something that you like, kind of like the Mech Knights, for example. They introduced a sort of new way to play where it's like very reliant on zones, and then Infernity says, well, you know, you need to have no cards in your hand to for you to use most of these effects. And I guess that's fine, and it's kind of, you know, cool and unique that way. However, I feel like there was a period in time where Infernity was quite popular, and you had quite a lot of scumbags playing this deck. So what that meant was that people started setting monsters in their back row. Yes, I believe that this entire archetype is badly designed because of the fact that you are reliant on setting cards and not having cards in your hand. And in order to fulfill that condition, if you have too many monsters, did create this sort of wave of savage cheating in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like really, really absurd stuff. And generally, you don't really have the right to call a judge unless it's like, you know, super infractious, because, you know, you can't just accuse your opponent of cheating without having any grounds for it. But there are ways with Infernity that just really facilitates that. And I think that by design, the archetype allowed this kind of way to play for some people, unfortunately. And then we have SHADDOLL Fusion. So I believe that cards that really just punish you for simply playing your deck at a sort of fundamental level is just really unfair. So like, SHADDOLL Fusion is obviously really powerful, but I think it's just badly designed because of the fact that it's punishing decks simply for playing their deck. Some decks are fine with not entering the extra deck. Like, for example, if we take Necros, you know, you could play against Shaddolls and you could Trish them and then maybe make a rank 4 like Emerald, draw some cards, recycle, etc. That was kind of cool, but like, you know, if you go into your extra for the Emerald, you're being a little bit greedy. So there's that risk reward, you know, because they might have that SHADDOLL Fusion, they might not, but then you're getting a card out of it. So it did have that sort of drawback to it. But that's in the case of Necros. Not every deck can function without its extra deck. You see, if you're playing something like Ritual Beast or Burning Abyss, I don't know, just any sort of super extra deck reliant deck, then it's not really your fault for having to need to enter the extra deck. And I feel that SHADDOLL Fusion severely punishes simply just trying to play your deck. And I feel like that's a very fundamentally bad thing for Yu-Gi-Oh! And I feel like that's why I believe that SHADDOLL Fusion is particularly broken at one point, but also from a design perspective, just really, really, you know, I just don't think it should be a thing. And I guess finally, to round this all off, we have Pot of Generosity. Now, I know I wasn't going to include cards that are bad or super overpowered, just on the basis of the fact that they are bad or they are super powered, because, you know, like as I explained at the start, being overpowered or being bad doesn't necessarily mean it's badly designed. Pot of Generosity is just in a league of its own. It is so bad. It has no play or no sort of interaction with anything. It is just a neg 3. There is no combo. There's nothing cool you can do with this card. It is just neg 3. And it's just so terrible. I just don't know what the purpose of it is. Like, I just don't know what the purpose of this card is. What is it for? Why? I just don't get it. I just don't get it. So yeah, that's Pot of Generosity. Anyway, this has been my list of 10 cards that I feel are just particularly badly designed and just generally bad for the game. So if you have any other cards that you want to mention, please do leave them down in the comment section down below. If you want to help support the channel and stuff, then maybe check out my Patreon and check out my Twitch channel to join the streams for some live fun action, etc. And we'll see you next time.